So earlier in the year, I checked out and reviewed God of War, and I thought it was a really great game. It made me excited to play the rest of the franchise, which is why it took me basically half a year to get to God of War 2. This game in particular is known as the Great Send-Off for the PlayStation 2. It was a beloved console, but does it get a beloved send-off? Let's find out.
So the adventure begins with Kratos in the same position he was in at the end of the last game. With a gigantic Spartan army at his disposal, he's conquering city after city after city. Why?
Because he is an asshole.
Unsurprisingly, this manages to piss off Zeus and the other gods of Olympus, so they betray him by sending a giant statue at him. Kratos appears victorious, but...
Do you need more proof than this?
From there, Zeus finishes off Kratos, leaving him to die. But Kratos survives by the power of plot convenience and now has to travel to the Sisters of Fate to go back in time to when Zeus betrayed him.
Wait, so Kratos is spending the game tracking down a magical MacGuffin to kill a god with? It's the first game all over again.
Actually, I don't think the story is as good as the first game. I don't think it fleshes out its characters, and the plot overall just moves at comatose pace. The first game had issues with this, definitely. Like I said in my review, the traveling and unlocking of Pandora's Temple was an aggravatingly long process. But at least it fleshed out Kratos, giving us backstory as we went along. He was an interesting and tragic character, and the flashbacks also served to give us some kind of story development as we continued throughout Pandora's Temple. In God of War 2, the character roster expands without giving anybody any interesting traits because you spend almost the entire game on your solo trek towards the Sisters of Fate. And the guy you're trekking with, Kratos, he ain't sympathetic anymore. He's an asshole who deserved what he got when Zeus stabbed him. And yes, I'm aware that you get Zeus's backstory in a similar fashion to getting Kratos's in the last game, but it's only done in like 2 cutscenes across a 9-hour period.
Look, game writers, if you want your stories to be interesting, you need to make things happen in it. Don't just give me some stupid objective and check back in 10 hours, okay? Sure, other games have sort of done this. I mean, you take, The Last of Us, you only had one objective. Take LA to the Fireflies. But did you just walk towards the capital for 10 hours and that was it? Hell no! You went to new locations, met exciting characters, conquered challenges. Things happened. You felt like you were making progress. This game doesn't do it, and that kind of makes me question the reason of almost giving it a story in the first place.
Luckily, I'd say God of War 2 does a very good job of bringing in new gameplay mechanics to the series, mostly for puzzles and platforming, and I'm happy with the new mechanics they added. For platforming, we've got these bird wings that help you glide across the screen like Batman. I've always been a fan of long-range platforming, so these were nice. Even better is the grapple. Although kind of awkward to use at first, it's cool. Swinging around like Tarzan feels appropriately badass and occasionally cinematic. Puzzles get a new wrinkle as well, slowing down time. Its use is obviously limited to certain areas, but it leads to a couple really cool puzzles. As for changes to the fighting, well, let's be honest, the first game's combat system was already terrific, so clearly the developers felt there wasn't really a need to innovate too much here, and they were right. We've gotten basically the same fighting system, and it feels just as good. The only real difference I felt was that the counter system feels more satisfying. There's also some new weapons, but I never use them. In my last review, I said the Blades of Chaos were one of the coolest sets of weapons in video game history, so why would I use anything else? Yeah, I know that some sub-weapons are probably more effective on certain enemies, but how would I know which weapons to use on which enemies without a health bar on the enemies? I'm better off just sticking to my badass long-range chains of death that I've been upgrading all this time. Actually, speaking of health bars, I noticed something very distressing. The boss fights no longer have health bars. Huh? What happened here? The first game gave its bosses health bars. What is this? Yeah, alright, not every game needs to give its bosses health bars. For example, most Nintendo bosses are killed in 3 hits as sort of a rule. And I can think of a couple of my all-time favorite games that also don't have health bars. So, what's the difference here? I honestly don't know, but I can definitely say that having health bars and then taking them away was not a smart move. Some of these boss fights can just drag on. And for the record, I'm not counting the fight you're looking at right now as a boss fight. Considering he's repeated an appalling 3 times, I consider him more to be a very irritating mini-boss. I mean, it's nice that there are more bosses, but they mostly aren't what I was hoping for when I requested some more bosses in the last review. A lot of them are just a duel between you and some regular-sized schmuck, essentially being a glorified regular fight. They're fun, but not very memorable, especially when compared to the one-on-one fight against Ares in the original. And when you do get those really big monsters to fight, the opening boss fight is pretty neat. It's not as memorable as the Hydra fight, but okay, that's hitting below the belt. But the other couple of big fights are really underwhelming. I'm not entirely sure why. I guess it's partially the lack of health bars making things more monotonous, or the heavier emphasis on cryptic methods of inflicting damage when in an action game. I just want to memorize patterns and kill shit. But I guess the biggest reason is that by the time I had hit the second epic boss fight about 9 hours in, the game had put me in a really shitty mood.
I guess it's time to just abandon the pretense and say, I don't like this game. I really don't.
To me, this game is proof that you can have incredibly polished gameplay and impressive presentation, but it all means nothing when a game bores you. And my god, this game can be incredibly dull. Look, there's a reason why it took me almost 6 months to review this game. Yeah, I of course got distracted by a few new releases, as well as schoolwork. But if you were wondering about the Battlefront video, honestly, I didn't start working on that till mid to late May. I honestly went right to God of War 2 after finally completing the Tomb Raider video. But honestly, after getting about 4 hours in, it just wasn't clicking for me. I found myself with no desire to keep playing. I honestly quit the game out of boredom, and since my 2-year anniversary of reviewing was upon me, I went with a childhood favorite that was easy and quick to capture footage for. I gave the game a couple of months, came back with a new save file, and nothing's changed, guys. Don't get me wrong, I didn't quit this time. I played all the way through to the bullshit cliffhanger ending. But god damn it, I can't express how tempted I constantly was to stop playing and review BioShock or Sonic Generations or Ivy the Kiwi. I don't know, just not this.
It's fair to say that over a minute after dropping that bombshell and failing to offer an explanation, you were probably wondering why. It's very simple. The pacing and the creativity level are both horrible, especially when compared to the first game.
I already talked about how your objective is essentially the same for 8 hours. And yeah, I don't care if it doesn't sound like a big deal, because I think it is. The game just feels incredibly padded. However, I brought up this issue in the review of the first game, so why is God of War 1 still such a great game while I can't stand its sequel? Well, God of War 1 didn't have this much padding. There was more to do before and after getting Pandora's Box in that game. Meanwhile, reaching the Sisters of Fate in God of War 2 is essentially the entire campaign. You also got more interesting and frequent backstories in the first game. And biggest of all, God of War 1 was just really creative and memorable. From the fight on those conveyor belts, to the platforming section where you had to haul ass to save that one Oracle, to dodging those fireballs and the saw blades, and that really cool Tetris puzzle with all those hidden chests up in that one corner, and the underworld.
Oh my god, there we go. The Underworld. It's the perfect way to compare the two God of Wars. And why? You return there in God of War 2. Well, sort of, I think. I mean, it's the place where you meet Atlas. Like, you have to die to get there, and it's the same basic aesthetic. Close enough. Only difference, it's dull.
I vividly remember my trip to Hades in the original game. There were those great rolling spikes to balance my way across, and who can forget that climb? Yeah, I'm aware it frustrated me so much that it made me parody The Dark Knight Rises, but that section sure was invigorating, and I kinda want to do it again. Meanwhile, in God of War 2, I don't remember anything about my trip down south. Nothing interesting happened down there. It's a perfect metaphor for the rest of the game. Almost nothing stood out. It was just a ceaseless procession of generic enemy encounters spliced with mostly average puzzles and platforming. Yeah, there are a few exceptions to this. Anything with the grapple is awesome, and like I said, stopping time leads to a couple neat puzzles. Most notably, when you have to reverse time, then slow it down so you can keep this one guy from killing himself so you can personally smash his face against some fine literature. Yeah, that was hilarious. This game really needed more of that. Other memorable moments include a fight inside an elevator when the spiked ceiling is constantly descending on you. That was difficult in a fun way, and making those giant horses move truly was a sight to behold. But across a 12-hour game, a few entertaining moments don't do it for me, and the general monotony just makes difficulty more frustrating than fun. Put it to you this way, this game is just as difficult, if not a little easier than God of War 1. In fact, it's overall less demanding, especially if you compare the two final bosses. Ares took like 15 tries while I got Zeus on my second attempt. But God of War 2 just bored the hell out of me, thus making me incredibly pissed off when it pulled some cheap shit. Both games have respawning enemies, but this game was 90 times more annoying about it. I can cite 2 examples off the top of my head. First example, these trolls kept coming and coming and coming and killing me and ugh! Turns out I had to kill the smaller mooks before they could call backup. What kind of crap is that? And the one time I've ever had a problem with collision detection in this series is when the mooks are calling the trolls and you can't hit them, which is a real pain in the dick because soon there can be 4 to 5 angry ogres that overwhelm you and it pissed me off. And it does it again later with these fire-breathing dogs. They spout out babies that will eventually grow into full-sized fire spewers. And even when you prevent those from growing all the way up, the game will respawn more fully grown dogs on its own. Dear Jesus, stop respawning enemies, damn it! It makes the combat way more frustrating and repetitive than it needs to be. Even easy encounters can go on for way too long. This one section just kept spawning regular dudes for 9 minutes straight.
What? Oh my god, stop padding your already overly padded game. Do you want me to hate it? Well, I kinda do. Look, when I can't go more than an hour and a half into the game without rage quitting, and when I just am so tempted to abandon the experience altogether, I think it's fair to say, this game ain't my cup of tea. But do I consider it to be a bad game? Not exactly.
The game is very polished with strong core mechanics. The combat can be pretty satisfying, with a ton of brutal animations that always brought a brief smile to my face. As I said, all the additions to the formula like stopping time or the grapple fit very well and lead to a tiny bit of creativity, certainly the most entertaining segments this game has going for it. The graphics are really terrific for the previous generation, and the music is just as empowering as before. There's some fun to be had and a lot to like here for most people, but for me, the lethargic pacing and serious lack of creativity kept me from enjoying myself, and this is coming from someone who really enjoyed the original God of War. Maybe this game is suffering from a case of been there, done that syndrome. I don't know. All I know is that this is the game that wowed critics and was said to surpass its predecessor. This is the game that transformed God of War from a one-hit wonder to one of Sony's premier franchises. And this is the game that is fondly called the swan song for the beloved PlayStation 2. But I just don't see it.